Captain Tae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the big window. The Harmony's Edge was the biggest ship in Earth's fleet. It had been flying through space for 3 weeks, checking on human colonies near the edge of known space. The morning started like any other day. Tae-ho drank his coffee and read reports from his crew. Everything seemed normal until Lieutenant Ji-won Park rushed to his side. "Captain, we have an urgent message from the Galactic Council," she said. Her voice was shaking. "They say it's emergency level 1. Tae-ho put down his coffee cup. Emergency level 1 meant something very bad was happening. In all his 20 years as a captain, he had only seen this code twice before. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The screen flickered, and a strange alien appeared. It looked like a tall bird with blue feathers and 4 arms. This was a Quillen, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. The Quillens were known for being calm and wise, but this one looked scared. "Captain Kim," the alien said, "I am Ambassador Vel Quinn of the Galactic Council. I have very bad news for humanity." Tae-ho felt his stomach drop. Bad news from the Galactic Council usually meant war or disease or some other terrible thing. "The Aid Veltaran Empire has sent an ultimatum to Earth," the ambassador continued. "They demand that all humans leave every colony outside the Sol system. You have 30 standard days to comply." "And if we don't?" Tae-ho asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. "Complete eradication of the human species," the ambassador said quietly. Those were their exact words. The bridge became very quiet. Tae-ho could hear the hum of the ship's engines and the beeping of computers, but no one spoke. Everyone knew about the Veltarans. They were one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Commander Dong-Soo Lee, Tae-ho's tactical officer, stepped forward. He was a tall man with serious eyes who had fought in many battles. "How big is their fleet?" Dong-Soo asked. The ambassador's feathers drooped. "Our intelligence reports show they have over 12,000 ships. They have conquered 17 different species in the past 100 years. No one has ever successfully fought them." Lieutenant Ji-won Park checked her computer. "Sir, we have 847 ships total across all human colonies. That includes cargo ships and small patrol boats." The numbers were not good. 12,000 against 800. Tae-ho had been in many fights during his career, but never against odds like these. "Why are they doing this?" Tae-ho asked. "Humans have always followed galactic law. We pay our taxes to the Council. We don't attack other species." The ambassador looked uncomfortable. "The Veltarans say humans are expanding too fast. They call you aggressive primitives who don't know your place in the galaxy. They believe you will become a threat to their empire if you continue to grow." "That's crazy," said Engineer Hai-Ri Shin from her station. She was young but very smart about ships and weapons. "Humans have only been in space for 200 years. Most species have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The Veltarans don't care about fairness," the ambassador replied. "They only care about power. They want to stop humanity before you become strong enough to challenge them." Tae-ho walked to the big window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were millions of humans living on dozens of different worlds. Farmers growing food, scientists making discoveries, children playing in parks under alien suns. All of them were now in danger. "What does the rest of the galaxy think about this?" he asked. The ambassador was quiet for a moment. "Most species believe humanity will surrender. The Veltarans are too powerful to fight. It would be logical to accept their terms." "Logical," Tae-ho repeated. The word tasted bad in his mouth. Lieutenant Jiwon Park was listening to radio signals from across the galaxy. "Captain, I'm picking up lots of chatter from other species. They're all talking about us. Most of them think we'll give up and go back to Earth. Some are even placing bets on how fast we'll surrender," added Communications Officer Woo Jin Kang. Tae-ho felt anger rising in his chest. Not just at the Veltarans, but at all the species who thought humans were weak. They saw Earth's people as young and stupid, not worth fighting for. "Ambassador," Tae-ho said, "please send a message to the Veltaran Emperor. Tell him we need time to discuss his offer with our government." "Of course, Captain. How much time do you need?" 24 hours. After the ambassador signed off, Tae-ho called his senior officers together. Commander Dong-Soo Lee, Lieutenant Jiwon Park, Engineer Hairi Shin, and the others gathered around the meeting table. "Sir," Dong-Soo said, "we can't fight 12,000 ships with 800. It's impossible." "Maybe," Tae-ho said. "But before we decide anything, I want to talk to Earth Command. Set up a secure channel to Admiral So-Young Choi." It took an hour to establish the connection across the vast distance to Earth. When Admiral Choi appeared on the screen, she looked tired but determined. She was a small woman with gray hair and steel in her eyes. "Captain Kim," she said, "I assume you've heard about the Veltaran ultimatum." "Yes, Admiral. What are our orders?" Admiral Choi smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made a difficult decision. "Our orders are simple, Captain. We don't negotiate with bullies. If the Veltarans want a war, they can have one. But it won't be the kind of war they're expecting." Tae-ho felt something cold move down his spine. There was something in the Admiral's voice that he had never heard before, something dangerous. "Admiral, with respect, we're outnumbered 15-1. How can we possibly win? Captain, the Veltarans have spent 1,000 years conquering species who fight the way they fight. Big fleets in open space, following rules of honor and tradition. They've never faced an enemy like humanity." "What do you mean?" Admiral Choi's smile grew wider. "They think they know what humans are capable of. They're about to learn they're very, very wrong. Prepare your ship, Captain. In 30 days, we're going to teach the galaxy why you don't threaten mankind." The connection ended, leaving Tae-ho and his crew staring at a blank screen. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant. But somewhere in those stars, 12,000 alien ships were preparing for war. Tae-ho looked at his crew. They were scared, but they trusted him. More importantly, they trusted Earth. "Well," he said, "I guess we'd better get ready for the fight of our lives." Dr. Kyung-min Yoon had not slept in 3 days. He stood in his secret laboratory deep inside an asteroid, drinking his 5th cup of coffee and watching his team work. The laboratory was hidden so well that even most humans didn't know it existed. "Doctor, the new batch is ready for testing," said his assistant, a young woman named Bo-Ra Kim. She pointed to a table covered with metal objects that looked like simple pieces of iron. Kyung-min picked up one of the objects. It was heavy and felt cold in his hands. To anyone else, it would look like a chunk of scrap metal. But this piece of metal was going to change everything. "Run the test," he said. Bo-Ra pressed a button, and a machine shot the metal piece at incredible speed toward a target. The target was made of the same material as Veltaran ship armor. The metal piece went through it like it was made of paper. "Perfect," Kyung-min whispered. "Project Heimdall is working." Across the galaxy, other humans were working just as hard. On the industrial world of New Busan, engineer Hairi Shin was converting mining equipment into something very different. The huge machines that normally dug for precious metals were being changed into weapons that could throw chunks of metal faster than bullets. "Are you sure this will work?" asked foreman Jae-sung Park. He was an old man who had been mining asteroids for 30 years. "It has to work," Hairi replied, wiping sweat from her face. "The Veltarans expect us to fight with energy weapons and fancy technology. They won't expect us to throw rocks at them." "But these aren't normal rocks," Jae-sung said, looking at the metal projectiles. "No, they're not. These rocks will be moving so fast that when they hit a Veltaran ship, they'll release more energy than a nuclear bomb." Meanwhile, Captain Woo Jin Kang was flying his stealth ship Silent Arrow through dangerous space near Veltaran territory. His ship was painted black and used special technology to hide from enemy sensors. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive Veltaran fleet gathering near the Epsilon star system," reported his pilot, Ne Young Jeon. She was young but had the best eyes in the human fleet. "How many ships?" Woo Jin asked. "At least 3,000, sir." "They're organizing into battle formation," Woo Jin smiled grimly. The Veltarans were gathering their ships exactly where Earth Command had predicted they would. Everything was going according to plan. "Send the information back to Earth using the quantum transmitter," he ordered, "and make sure we stay hidden. If they detect us, the whole plan falls apart." Back on Earth, cultural anthropologist Sung-ho Baek was studying recordings of Veltaran communications. He had been listening to their radio signals for weeks, learning how they thought and what they expected. "Admiral Choi," he said during a video conference, "the Veltarans are very confident. They think this will be easy." Admiral So Young Choi appeared on his screen. She was in the hidden command center that Earth had built under the mountains of Korea. "What exactly are they saying?" she asked. "They're calling humans the retreating primitives. They think we're running away because we're scared." Emperor Zexthul gave a speech yesterday saying that humans will surrender before the deadline. "Good," Admiral Choi said. "The more confident they are, the bigger the surprise will be." Sung-ho looked confused. "Admiral, with respect, our colonies really are evacuating. Civilian ships are leaving outer worlds and heading back toward Earth. How is that good?" Admiral Choi smiled the same dangerous smile she had shown Captain Tae-ho. "Kim." "Mr. Beck, those aren't evacuation ships. They're supply ships carrying the components for the biggest construction project in human history." All across human space, the evacuation continued. To alien observers, it looked like humanity was giving up. Cargo ships moved constantly between the outer colonies and the inner worlds. Civilian families left their homes on distant planets, but the aliens didn't look closely enough. If they had, they would have noticed something strange. The cargo ships were carrying much more than just families and personal belongings. They were carrying machines, raw materials, and millions of the metal projectiles that Dr. Kyung-min Yoon had designed. On the asteroid base where Kyung-min worked, the construction had reached fever pitch. Hundreds of workers were building massive railgun installations inside hollowed-out asteroids. The railguns were so big that they could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. "Doctor, we've completed installation number 47, reported engineer Min Kyung-seo. "The targeting system is online and ready." "Excellent," Kyung-min said. "How many more do we need?" "According to the plan, we need at least 200 installations to cover all possible Veltaran approach routes." Kyung-min looked at his watch. 22 days until the deadline. "We'll have them ready. We have to." The Veltarans continued to gather their massive fleet. Their ships were beautiful, covered in crystalline armor that sparkled in the light of distant stars. Each ship carried powerful energy weapons and shields designed to stop laser and plasma attacks. Emperor Zex Thul gave another speech to his people, broadcast across the galaxy for everyone to hear. The primitive humans are fleeing like scared animals, he declared. Soon they will all be contained on their home world, where they belong. Let this be a lesson to any species that thinks they can expand without our permission. Many alien species listened to this speech and nodded in agreement. The Veltarans were the strongest military force in the galaxy. Of course, the humans would surrender. But some aliens were not so sure. Captain Vel Quinn, the Quillen ambassador who had delivered the ultimatum, was studying human behavior more carefully. "Something doesn't feel right," he told his aide. "Humans have a reputation for being stubborn. Why are they giving up so easily?" His aide, a younger Quillen named Kex Wynn, ruffled his feathers nervously. "Perhaps they're more intelligent than we thought. Perhaps they realize they cannot win." "Maybe," Velquin said. "But I've studied human history. They fought wars on their own planet for thousands of years. They don't surrender easily, even when they're losing badly." As the days passed, more human colonies appeared to empty out. The mining stations went quiet. The research facilities stopped transmitting. To alien intelligence services, it looked like humanity was completely abandoning everything beyond their home solar system. Captain Tae-Ho Kim received new orders from Admiral Choi. His ship and several others were to patrol near the outer colonies, making sure they looked properly abandoned. "Sir," Lieutenant Jiwon Park said, "I'm detecting Veltaran scout ships in this system. They're checking to make sure the colonies are really empty." "Let them look," Tae-Ho replied. "They won't find anything suspicious." And they didn't. The Veltaran scouts saw empty buildings, silent factories, and no signs of human activity. What they didn't see were the hundreds of humans hiding in underground bunkers, manning the secret weapon installations that had been built into the asteroids and moons. With 5 days left until the deadline, Emperor Zexathul gave his final speech. "The humans have shown wisdom in accepting their fate," he announced. "Tomorrow, our grand fleet will arrive at their former colonies to ensure they have completely withdrawn. Any humans found violating our orders will be destroyed as an example to the galaxy." Dr. Kyungmin Yoon listened to this speech while making final adjustments to his weapons. He had not slept in 6 days, but his eyes were bright with determination. "Bo-Ra," he said to his assistant, "send the message to all installations. Project Heimdall is ready to begin." Across human space, hidden in asteroids and abandoned space stations, 237 massive railgun installations powered up for the first time. Each one was aimed at a different point in space, creating an invisible web of destruction that the Veltarans would fly right into. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the humans would really surrender. Most aliens expected the Veltarans to find empty worlds and claim an easy victory. They were about to learn that humans were full of surprises. Admiral Myung-Soo Han sat in his command chair deep inside the Kuiper Belt, watching dozens of screens that showed Veltaran ships moving through space. The hidden command center was built inside a large asteroid, completely invisible to enemy sensors. "Admiral, the Veltaran Grand Fleet has arrived at the new Sol colony," reported Communications Officer Eugene Lee. "They're expecting to find human ships surrendering." "How many ships do they have?" Admiral Han asked. 4,000 in the first wave, sir. More are coming behind them." Admiral Han looked at his watch. It was exactly noon, Earth time, on the 30th day. The deadline had arrived. "Send the message to all installations," he said calmly. Operation Thunder God begins now. Across dozens of star systems, humans who had been hiding for weeks received the same message. In asteroid bases, abandoned space stations, and hollowed-out moons, people pressed buttons and pulled levers. The Veltaran Emperor Zexthul was aboard his flagship, expecting to see human ships begging for mercy. Instead, his sensors showed empty space around the new Sol colony. "Where are the humans?" he demanded. "They should be here to formally surrender." His tactical officer, a tall Veltaran with bright purple crystals growing from his arms, checked his instruments. "My lord, I detect no human ships in this system. Perhaps they have already fled." "Cowards," the Emperor said with satisfaction. "Begin scanning for any humans left behind. We will make examples of them." That was when the first railgun fired. The installation was hidden inside an asteroid that looked like any other piece of space rock. But inside, it was a massive electromagnetic cannon that could shoot chunks of metal at incredible speed. The metal projectile was only the size of a person's fist, but it was moving at nearly the speed of light. When it hit the Emperor's flagship, it went through the crystalline armor like a knife through paper. The impact released so much energy that the entire front section of the ship exploded. Alarms began screaming throughout the Veltaran fleet. "What was that?" the Emperor shouted, picking himself up from the floor. Before his officers could answer, 17 more railguns fired from different directions. Metal projectiles slammed into Veltaran ships, punching holes completely through them. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles were destroyed in seconds. "Shields up! Return fire!" screamed the tactical officer. But there was nothing to return fire at. The railgun installations were hidden and firing from millions of kilometers away. The Veltaran energy weapons couldn't even reach that far. More railguns fired. The simple chunks of metal moved so fast that the Veltaran sensors couldn't track them. One moment a ship was whole. The next moment it had a hole the size of a bus. Punch through its center. "My lord," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking, "we're under attack, but I can't find the enemy. Our sensors show nothing but asteroids and space debris." Captain Yunji Choi was watching all of this from her ship Ghost Runner, which was floating invisible in space only a few thousand kilometers from the Veltaran fleet. Her ship used advanced stealth technology that made it completely undetectable. "Weapons officer," she said quietly, "prepare kinetic interceptors. Target the ships that aren't damaged yet." "Ready, Captain," replied Weapons Officer Taemin Yoon. "Fire!" The Ghost Runner launched a swarm of small missiles, each one carrying a chunk of metal designed to punch through ship armor. The missiles were too small and fast for Veltaran sensors to detect. The Veltarans were still trying to figure out where. The railgun attacks were coming from when dozens of their remaining ships suddenly exploded. The kinetic interceptors hit them like invisible hammers, smashing through their crystalline armor and destroying their engines. Emperor Zexthul watched in horror as his magnificent fleet was torn apart by weapons he couldn't even see. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, retreat immediately!" But it was too late for many of them. More human ships materialized out of nowhere as their stealth systems powered down. Captain Jae-sung Park's squadron appeared behind the fleeing Veltarans, launching more kinetic weapons. The Veltaran ships tried to use their energy shields, but the shields were designed to stop lasers and plasma beams. The simple chunks of metal flew right through them as if they didn't exist. In 12 hours, the humans destroyed over 1,000 Veltaran ships while losing exactly 0 of their own. The survivors fled back to Veltaran space, carrying news of a defeat unlike anything in their empire's history. Dr. Kyung-min Yoon watched the battle results from his hidden laboratory. His simple metal projectiles had worked perfectly. The Veltarans' advanced technology was useless against basic physics. Sometimes, he said to his assistant Bo-Ra Kim, the old ways are the best ways. You don't need fancy energy weapons when you can just throw rocks really, really fast. The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than light speed. Communication. Alien species that had expected humanity to surrender were shocked by what they heard. Ambassador Vel Quinn of the Quillans received the first reports and couldn't believe them. You're telling me that the humans destroyed a quarter of the Veltaran Grand Fleet in half a day? He asked his intelligence officer. Yes, sir. And they did it using simple kinetic weapons. No energy beams, no exotic technology. Just chunks of metal moving very fast. Vel Quinn ruffled his feathers nervously. But that's impossible. The Veltarans have the best armor and shields in the galaxy. Apparently not against this type of attack, sir. Other alien governments were having similar conversations. The Veltarans had seemed unbeatable for so long that no one had imagined they could lose a battle, especially not to the primitive humans. Emperor Zexthul arrived back at his capital world in a rage. Half of his magnificent fleet was destroyed or damaged. Thousands of his best soldiers were dead, and he still had no idea how the humans had done it. Find out everything about human weapons technology, he ordered his scientists. I want to know how they hit us from such long range. His chief scientist, an old Veltaran with dim crystals, studied the battle recordings for days. Finally, he came to the Emperor with his report. My lord, the humans used electromagnetic acceleration to fire simple metal projectiles at extremely high velocity. The weapons are crude but effective. Crude? The Emperor snarled. They destroyed 1,000 of our ships. Yes, my lord, but we can defend against this type of attack. We just need to modify our armor and tactics. The Emperor was not satisfied. What about their invisible ships? How did they sneak so close to our fleet? They appear to use advanced stealth technology that hides heat signatures and electronic emissions. Very clever for such a young species. The Emperor walked to his window and looked out at his damaged fleet. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were now floating in space, full of holes, and barely able to fly. Send a message to all our client species, he said. Call in every favor and alliance. I want 20,000 ships. We will crush these humans completely. But the Emperor didn't know that Captain Woojin Kang's stealth ship was still hidden near Veltaran space, listening to every communication. The humans knew exactly what their enemies were planning. Admiral So Young Choi received the intelligence report in her underground command center on Earth. So they're calling in reinforcements, she said. Good. Let them bring every ship they have. It won't matter. Admiral, asked her aide, how can you be so confident? 20,000 ships is a lot, even for us. Admiral Choi smiled her dangerous smile. Because they still don't understand what they're fighting. They think this was just a battle. They don't realize it was a demonstration. She turned to look at a map showing all the human colonies and Veltaran territories. The first battle showed them our weapons. The next phase will show them something much worse. What happens when you make humans angry? Across the galaxy, other alien species were watching the conflict with growing concern. The humans had proven they could fight, but what would they do next? Many species that had once dismissed humanity as weak were now reconsidering their opinions. The Veltarans had learned that human weapons were dangerous. They were about to learn that human strategy was even more dangerous than their weapons. The war was just beginning. Fleet Admiral In-Ho Kim received the intelligence report while his ship was hidden in the shadow of a gas giant. The news was both good and bad. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Bora Kim, "the Veltarans have assembled their largest fleet in history. 20,000 ships from 6 different species." "Which species joined them?" Admiral Kim asked. "The Hegemony, the Zenth Collective, the Crimson Suns, the Iron Claw Empire, the Void Hunters, and the Crystal Lords. They all owe military service to the Veltarans." Admiral Kim studied the star charts on his screen. 20,000 ships was an enormous force, but he wasn't worried. Admiral Choi had prepared for this. "Send the signal to all human commanders," he said. "Begin Phase 2. Across the galaxy, human ships received the message and began to move. But they didn't group together into one large fleet like their enemies expected. Instead, they scattered in all directions like seeds in the wind. Commander Eugene Lee commanded a small squadron of 12 ships. Her mission was to attack Veltaran supply lines, and she had been planning it for weeks. "Target confirmed," reported her navigator, Lieutenant Sung-Ho Baek. "Veltaran Fuel Depot, lightly defended." Eugene looked at the depot through her ship's cameras. It was a massive structure floating in space, storing enough fuel for hundreds of ships. Only 6 Veltaran patrol ships were guarding it. "Move in. Fast and quiet," she ordered. "Hit them before they can send a distress signal." Her ships approached using stealth technology, getting close enough to launch kinetic missiles. The metal projectiles punched through the depot's storage tanks, causing massive explosions as the fuel ignited. "Depot destroyed, Commander," reported her weapons officer. "No survivors." "Good. Move to the next target." Similar attacks were happening throughout Veltaran space. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, destroyed important targets, and vanished before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Captain Jae-Sung Park led his squadron against a communication relay station. Captain Min Kyung-seo attacked a shipyard where new Veltaran vessels were being built. Captain Na Young-jeon destroyed a supply convoy carrying food and medical supplies. The Veltarans tried to respond, but their enemies were like ghosts. Every time they sent ships to defend one target, the humans attacked somewhere else. Emperor Zexthul was furious as reports poured in from across his empire. "They're attacking everything," he shouted. "Fuel depots, communication stations, supply convoys, repair facilities. How are they doing this?" His tactical advisor, General Keth Marr, studied the reports with growing confusion. "My lord, they appear to have split their small fleet into dozens of tiny groups. Each group attacks a different target. That's suicide. Small groups can't fight our main fleet." "No, my lord, but they're not trying to fight our main fleet. They're destroying everything our fleet needs to operate." The Emperor was beginning to understand. The humans weren't playing by the rules of civilized warfare. They weren't meeting his grand fleet in honorable battle. Instead, they were attacking the things that kept his fleet running. "Send ships to protect our supply lines," he ordered. "My lord, we would need to split our fleet into thousands of small groups to protect everything. That would make us vulnerable to attack." The Emperor was trapped. If he kept his fleet together, the humans would destroy his supply lines. If he split his fleet up, the humans might attack it piece by piece. Meanwhile, Captain Jae-Sung Park was implementing another part of the human strategy. His squadron had captured a Veltaran communication station instead of destroying it. "Broadcasting now, Captain," reported his communications officer, Specialist Woo Jin Kang. The message went out on all Veltaran military frequencies, but it wasn't in the human language. It was in perfect Veltaran, spoken by Dr. Min Kyung Seo, who had studied their culture for years. "Attention Veltaran forces," the message said. "This is Dr. Min Kyung Seo of Earth. We know where your families live. We know the location of your Emperor's secret bunkers. We know your military codes and your private communications." The message continued for 10 minutes, listing specific details about Veltaran society that should have been secret. Personal information about commanders, locations of hidden bases, even the Emperor's private schedule. The effect was immediate. Veltaran commanders began to panic, wondering how the humans had learned so much about them. Some began to suspect that there were human spies everywhere. But there were no spies. The humans had simply been listening to Veltaran communications for months, using advanced computers to break their codes and analyze their behavior. The psychological warfare was working. The Veltarans were used to fighting enemies who followed the same rules they did. They had never faced an enemy that attacked their supply lines, broadcast their secrets, and refused to fight fair battles. One by one, the client species began to have doubts. Captain Zeth Cole of the Hegemony Fleet called his admiral. "Sir, we've lost 3 supply convoys in 2 days. My ships are running low on fuel and ammunition." "The Veltarans promised us easy victory," Admiral Vexthon replied. This is not what they described. Similar conversations were happening throughout the Allied fleet. The Zenth Collective lost a major shipyard. The Crimson Suns had their communication network completely shut down. The Iron Claw Empire found their secret military bases being broadcast on public frequencies. Dr. Min Kyung Seo's analysis of alien psychology was proving correct. Species that were used to formal, honorable warfare couldn't adapt to humanity's unconventional methods. The first species to withdraw was the Crystal Lords. Their admiral sent a message to Emperor Zexthul. "Our obligations to your empire do not include suicide missions. We are returning to our home territory." The Emperor tried to threaten them, but the Crystal Lords had already jumped to hyperspace. The Zenth Collective was next. Then, the Crimson Suns. Within a week, half of the Emperor's allied fleet had abandoned him. Intelligence officer Bo-Ra Kim was monitoring alien communications from her hidden listening post. The conversations she recorded were very interesting. "Captain, I'm picking up a lot of chatter from other galactic governments," she reported to Captain Wu-Jin Kang. "They're all talking about how the humans fight." "What are they saying?" "They're scared, sir. The Altarian Republic is reviewing their defense plans. The Spiral Alliance is asking for meetings with Earth. Everyone wants to know if humans will attack them next." Captain Kang smiled. "Send this information to Admiral Choi. She'll want to know that our strategy is working." The strategy was indeed working. The humans weren't just fighting the Veltarans. They were demonstrating to the entire galaxy that even the most powerful empire could be defeated by an enemy that refused to follow traditional rules. Emperor Zexthul found himself commanding a fleet that was falling apart. His supply lines were destroyed, his allies had abandoned him, and his own commanders were losing confidence. "My lord," General Kethmar said during their daily briefing, "perhaps we should consider negotiating with the humans." "Never!" the Emperor roared. "I will not be defeated by primitives." But privately, he was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't primitives. They were something much more dangerous. They were innovators who thought completely differently than any species the Veltarans had ever fought. As the attacks continued, more Veltaran worlds began to surrender or declare independence. Planets, that had been conquered centuries ago saw an opportunity to break free from the Empire. The humans had done something that no one thought was possible. They had turned the galaxy's strongest empire into a crumbling ruin in just a few weeks, and they weren't finished yet. Admiral So-Young Choi sat in her command center watching reports come in from across the galaxy. Her plan was working perfectly. "Admiral," asked her aide, "what's the next phase?" Admiral Choi looked at the star map showing Veltaran territory. Most of it was now in chaos, with human ships attacking wherever they wanted. "Now we finish this," she said. "Send a message to Emperor Zexthul. Tell him we're ready to discuss terms for his surrender." Emperor Zexthul sat alone in his private bunker, deep beneath the surface of his home world. The magnificent palace above had been abandoned when human ships appeared in his star system. Now he was hiding like a common criminal. The message from Admiral So-Young Choi was displayed on his screen. The words were simple but terrifying. "We are ready to discuss the terms of your surrender." "My lord," General Kethmar said through the communication system, "we have lost contact with 70% of our fleet. The remaining ships are scattered and running low on supplies." The Emperor stared at the message. In all his long life, no one had ever demanded his surrender. The Veltaran Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. "What are their terms?" he asked quietly. The general's voice was shaking. "Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, reparations to be paid to enslaved species, and they want you to surrender yourself for trial by the Galactic Council." The Emperor closed his eyes. His empire was finished. In just 30 days, the humans had destroyed everything his ancestors had built. Admiral Tae-ho Kim, now promoted after his excellent service, stood on the bridge of his ship as it entered orbit around the Veltaran capital world. Behind him flew the largest human fleet ever assembled, over 2,000 ships. "Sir," Lieutenant Ji-Won Park reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from all remaining Veltaran forces in this system." "Accept their surrender," Tae-ho said, "but keep our weapons ready. We don't want any surprises." On Earth, diplomat Su Bin-yoon was preparing for the most important speech in human history. She would address the Galactic Council for the first time as humanity's official representative. "Are you ready?" asked Admiral So-Young Choi. Su-bin nodded. She had been practicing this speech for weeks. "Yes, Admiral. It's time the galaxy understood what humanity really stands for." The Galactic Council chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of species. Many of them looked nervous. They had all heard about what happened to the Veltarans. Ambassador Vel Quinn of the Quillans introduced the human diplomat. "The Council recognizes diplomat Su Bin-yoon of Earth." Su-bin stood at the speaker's podium and looked out at the assembled aliens. Many of them had expected humanity to be destroyed or enslaved by now. Instead, humans had won the most complete military victory in galactic history. "Members of the Council," she began, 30 days ago, the Veltaran Empire threatened to destroy my species. Today, that empire no longer exists." The chamber was completely silent. Everyone was listening carefully to every word. "We didn't want this war," Su-bin continued. "We tried to follow galactic law and live in peace with our neighbors. But when someone threatens to kill our families and destroy our homes, we fight back." She paused to let that sink in. "The Veltarans made a mistake. They thought humans were weak because we're young. They thought we would surrender because we don't have as many ships as they did. They were wrong." An alien representative raised his hand. Diplomat Yoon, many species are concerned about human military capabilities. Will Earth use these weapons against other species? Subin smiled. That depends entirely on whether other species threaten us. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to make sure that no one rules the galaxy through fear and violence. Another alien stood up. What will happen to the Veltaran territories? All species that were conquered by the Veltarans are now free to govern themselves, Subin replied. Earth will help them rebuild and defend their independence, but we won't control them. Historian Chang Wook Moon was recording everything, from his position in the human delegation. This moment would be remembered forever as the day humanity became a major galactic power. The aftermath of the war was swift and dramatic. 17 different species regained their independence from Veltaran rule. The client species that had abandoned the Veltarans during the fighting sought friendship with Earth. Dr. Kyung-min Yoon received the Nobel Prize for his revolutionary weapons designs, but his acceptance speech surprised many people. We built these weapons hoping we would never have to use them, he said. The fact that we did use them proves that sometimes the only way to ensure peace is to be so good at war that no one wants to fight you. On the industrial world of New Busan, engineer Hai Ri Shin was converting the military factories back to peaceful purposes. The machines that had built weapons were now making tools to help rebuild the worlds damaged by Veltaran rule. It feels good to build things instead of destroying them, she told her workers. Captain Na Young Jeon led the first human diplomatic mission to the liberated worlds. Everywhere she went, the message was the same. Earth doesn't want to replace the Veltarans as your rulers, she told planetary leaders. We want to make sure that no one can rule you against your will ever again. The former Veltaran territories were grateful but also curious about their liberators. Why did you help us? Asked President Kolventh of the newly freed Helix Republic. You could have just defeated the Veltarans and taken their territory for yourself, Na Young smiled. Because that's not who humans are. We believe every species has the right to be free. The establishment of the Terran Accords changed galactic politics forever. The new treaty created rules for warfare and established Earth as the protector of smaller species. Admiral So Young Choi oversaw the creation of the new peacekeeping force. Human ships would patrol the galaxy, watching for aggressive empires that might threaten weaker species. We're not going to be the galaxy's police, she explained to her officers. We're going to be the galaxy's guard dogs. Most of the time, we'll just watch. But if someone starts threatening innocent people, we'll bite. The Galactic Council officially recognized Earth's new role with a unanimous vote. Even species that had been suspicious of humans supported the decision. Emperor Zexthul was tried by the Galactic Council and sentenced to life imprisonment for crimes against sentient species. He spent his remaining days in a small cell thinking about how he had underestimated the primitive humans. 5 years after the war, Captain Wu Jin Kang visited a school on one of the liberated worlds. The children there were learning about the war in their history classes. Teacher, asked a young Altarian student, why did the humans win? The Veltarans had bigger ships and more weapons. The teacher, an old Quillan named Educator Mex Quinn, smiled at the question. The humans won because they thought differently than their enemies, she explained. The Veltarans expected humans to fight the same way everyone else fought. But humans are innovators. They find new solutions to old problems. Another student raised her hand. Will the humans ever threaten us like the Veltarans did? That's very unlikely. the teacher replied. The humans could have conquered the entire galaxy after defeating the Velterans. Instead, they gave freedom back to everyone who had lost it. That tells us what kind of species they really are. The lesson always ended the same way, with the teacher explaining the most important rule in the galaxy. And that's why, throughout all of known space, there's one thing that every species understands. You don't threaten mankind, not because they can't be reasoned with, but because when you threaten them, they don't just fight back. They make sure you can never threaten anyone ever again. Dr. Min-Kyung Seo, now Earth's chief xenopsychologist, was studying the long-term effects of the war. Her research showed that aggressive species across the galaxy had become much more peaceful after seeing what happened to the Veltarans. Fear can be a tool for peace, she wrote in her report. When everyone knows the consequences of starting a war, fewer wars get started. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had proven that being young didn't mean being weak, and having fewer ships didn't mean losing the war. Most importantly, they had shown that the right strategy could defeat any enemy, no matter how powerful. Earth's children grew up in a galaxy where their species was both respected and feared. They learned that with great power came great responsibility, and that the best way to keep the peace was to be ready for war. The stars belong to everyone now, not just the strong, and humanity stood guard to make sure it stayed that way.